Okay, confession before we start. I approved a pull request last month that I genuinely did not read.
How big was it?
2,400 lines. Agent generated. Tests were green, the demo looked fine, I hit approve.
And that guilt is why we're recording the series, isn't it?
Pretty much. This deck is about spec driven development, and the whole pitch fits on the title slide. Specs are the new code, agents are the new compilers, humans edit intent.
My first reaction is people said the exact same thing about UML. Model driven architecture was going to make code a build output too back in 2005.
Right, and that failed because the compiler half didn't exist. You drew the diagram, a human still typed everything by hand, and the diagram rotted within a sprint. What changed is the machine half is real now. A coding agent can take a written spec, plan, edit across a dozen files, run the test suite, and fix its own failures.
So the claim is once regeneration is cheap, the spec becomes the thing you version and review. And the code becomes something closer to a compiled binary.
That's the inversion. Nobody reviews the binary. You review the source.
Huh. So my job becomes writing very precise English.
Editing intent. Deciding what should exist, what correct means, what's explicitly out of scope. The typing was never the valuable part anyway.
Fine, I'm in. What's the route?
Why chat-driven coding collapses at scale. What the inversion actually changes. How to write a spec an agent can execute. Then the tooling. Spec Kit, Kiro, Tessel. And the economics underneath all of it.
And presumably, you explaining that merge you didn't read.
No excuses, just a better process. Let's go.
Roadmap slide. 6 stops on the map. Can I drive this one?
Be my guest.
Stop 1 is the pain, the crisis of vibe coding. Why one-shot prompting feels magical for an afternoon and collapses past toy scale. Stop 2 is the big conceptual move, the inversion. The spec becomes the durable artifact, and code becomes a build output you can regenerate.
That's the slide I'd argue the whole deck hangs on. Everything after it is just consequences.
Agreed. Then stop 3 gets practical, the anatomy of a good spec. User stories, acceptance criteria written in EARS syntax, non-goals, edge cases, success metrics.
EARS being the requirements templates. When this happens, the system shall do that?
Exactly. And it has a great origin story we'll get to. Stop 4 is the industry tour. GitHub Spec Kit, AWS Kiro, Tessel, Claude Code with its persistent memory file, cursor rules. All in one comparison table.
5 vendors who all woke up in the same year and shipped the same idea.
Convergent evolution, we'll spot the pattern. Stop 5 is the autonomy ladder. A way to grade how much your team actually delegates, from tab autocomplete at level 0 to gated end-to-end agents at level 4.
I like that one because it's a self-assessment. Most teams think they're further up than they are.
And stop 6 is the economics. Token cost versus rework cost and why determinism beats heroics.
Worth saying who this is for too. It's not an intro to coding agents, it's for people already using them. Copilot, Claude Code, Cursor, whatever. Who've hit the ceiling of chat-driven development.
The ceiling being, it worked great until the codebase got bigger than one person's chat history.
That's literally stop 1. But first there's a why now question to answer.
Right. Why is this happening in 2025 and not 2022?
Next slide. So the honest question on this slide. Why now? Why didn't spec-driven development happen in 2022? And why won't it wait until 2028?
The slide's answer is 2 curves crossing. Agent capability went up, process maturity stayed flat.
And the capability jump is measurable. Look at SWE Bench, real GitHub issues from real repos. Early 2024, frontier models resolved low single digits of those issues unassisted. By late 2025, the best agent setups were resolving well over 2/3.
That's a brutal curve. From party trick to junior engineer in about 2 years.
And it's not just benchmark scores. The shape of the work changed. Multi-file edits, running the test suite, reading the failures, fixing its own mistakes. That loop is the difference between autocomplete and an agent.
The long horizon bit matters too, right? Context windows went from 4,000 tokens to a million-ish, plus persistent project memory files.
Yeah, an hour-long autonomous run used to be science fiction because the agent forgot the plot by minute 10. Now it's a Tuesday.
Meanwhile, the process side, we drive all this with a chat box. Type a wish, hit enter, pray.
Prompt and pray. Works for one developer, one feature, one afternoon. It does not survive contact with a team, a quarter, or a production incident.
And the industry clearly noticed because 2025 was the year everyone shipped the same answer. Kiro came out of AWS in the summer, GitHub shipped Spec Kit in September.
And Tessel had already raised over 100 million before they'd even fully launched, betting the whole company on spec as source of truth. Three very different organizations. One move. Put a written spec between the human and the agent.
Okay, but play devil's advocate. Couldn't you read that as a hype wave rather than convergence? Fair challenge.
The tell for me is the call out at the bottom of the slide. When execution gets cheap and fast, the bottleneck moves upstream to deciding what to build and how you'll know it's right. That's not a fashion statement. That's queuing theory. The constraint moved, so the tooling followed it.
Huh. And that upstream decision, written down, is just a spec. That's the whole slide.
That's the whole slide. But before we get to the cure, we should feel the disease properly.
Vibe coding autopsy. Let's do it. Section 1. The crisis of vibe coding.
Crisis is a strong word for the divider, but look at the 4 pills on the slide. One-shot prompts, context evaporation, mega diffs, works on my chat.
I've personally shipped all 4 of those this quarter.
Same, honestly. That's why this section exists.
The term itself is funny though. Vibe coding started as a compliment, didn't it?
Yeah, Karpathy coined it in early 2025, basically describing the joy of fully giving in to the model and not even reading the diffs. As a weekend mode, it's genuinely delightful.
And then teams adopted weekend mode as their production process.
That's the crisis part. Not that vibing exists, but that it quietly became the default at companies shipping real software.
So the next 3 slides are the failure modes, in order of how much they hurt.
Roughly. First, the one-shot gamble itself. Then what happens to context and review. Then the punchline. Why a prompt can't be a unit of engineering at all.
Of the 4 pills, which one's the most expensive in practice?
The mega diff by a margin. Evaporated context wastes your own time. An unreviewed 3,000-line merge spends your customer's trust.
Cheery, can't wait. And works on my chat. I already know that one's going to sting.
It's meant to. In we go. Okay, real story. Friday afternoon, a teammate of mine types add auth to my app into the agent, goes to get coffee, comes back to about 3,000 lines of new code. Did it work? The demo worked, which is the most dangerous sentence in software.
Right, because the demo path is the one path the agent definitely tested.
And look at the loop on the slide diagram. Vague prompt, agent guesses intent and scope and stack, giant diff appears, human skims because it's too long to review, merge on vibes, regression in prod. Nobody knows why. And the arrow loops back to the start.
The part that gets me is what that 2-line prompt was standing in for. A requirements doc, a design review, and a test plan, all compressed into one wish.
Exactly. The agent has to fill every gap with guesses. Some guesses are right, some aren't, and you can't tell which. Because you never wrote down what right means.
What did add auth even turn into for your teammate? Session cookies, JWTs, magic links?
JWTs and local storage, naturally. Plus, and this is the scope drift bullet, it quietly restructured the routing layer to add middleware because nothing said it shouldn't.
Ugh, the silent refactor. I've had an agent fix a typo and also rename 40 files for consistency.
Helpful little arsonist.
The non-determinism bullet is the one I'd underline though. Run the same prompt tomorrow and you get a different architecture. There's no anchor to converge on.
Which is why the reroll trap is so expensive. Output's wrong, so you reprompt from scratch. And you burn tokens rediscovering decisions you already made in your head but never captured.
It's like negotiating a contract verbally every day with someone who has amnesia.
That's exactly the line I use. You end up relitigating the database schema for the fifth time.
Okay, but I want to defend vibe coding a little because the slide does too. For a spike or a throwaway script, this mode is genuinely great.
Completely agree. Prototyping at vibe speed is a superpower. The crisis starts at one specific moment, when the prototype quietly becomes the product,
And the only design doc is a chat log you closed last Tuesday.
which is precisely the next slide. What happens to all that context when the tab closes?
Spoiler, nothing good. Two failure modes on this slide, and the claim is they share one root cause. Left card first, context evaporation.
Here's the question that makes it land. In a vibe-coded project, where do the decisions live? The schema you debated? The naming convention you settled on? The performance trade-off you accepted?
In a chat session, which I will close.
And when you close the tab, the project's working memory is gone. It's a team whose only documentation is a whiteboard that gets wiped every night.
This bit me personally, by the way. I came back to a side project after 6 weeks and found a really weird retry queue in the sync code. Spent an evening trying to work out why past me built it that way.
And
No idea. The reasoning lived in a conversation with an agent, and the conversation was gone. I was reverse engineering my own intent.
the slide's exact bullet. 6 weeks later, why is it built this way and nobody can answer? Now multiply that by a new teammate joining or a new model version that needs everything re-explained from zero.
Okay, right card. The unreviewable mega diff. This one's mechanical rather than memory related.
Agents emit thousands of lines in minutes. Humans review maybe 200 lines with genuine attention. The old code review studies put careful review at a few hundred lines an hour tops. And after that, the eyes glaze and the approve button gets very easy to press.
LGTM theater. Scroll, skim, ship.
We've all performed in that production.
But hold on. The counter argument I always hear is the tests pass. Doesn't a green CI run cover for the skimmed review?
That's the nastiest bullet on the slide. The tests were generated by the same agent from the same wrong assumption. So the tests pass and the behavior is still wrong.
Oh, that's grim. The test suite is just the wrong assumption restated with assertions.
Self-consistent and incorrect. We had exactly that with the date handling change once. Agent assumed UTC everywhere, wrote 20 tests assuming UTC, all green, and every invoice in the Sydney time zone was a day off.
At least it was thorough about being wrong. So the root cause box at the bottom. Both failures are really one failure. Intent was never captured as an artifact.
A diff answers what changed. It cannot answer what was intended. And without a record of intent, neither a human reviewer nor an agent has anything to check the work against.
Which sets up the next slide nicely, making it precise why a prompt can't be the unit of engineering.
With a table and everything. Let's grade the poor prompt. Works on my chat. Whoever named this slide deserves a raise.
It's a perfect callback. Works on my machine was the classic excuse. Ran fine on one laptop, exploded everywhere else.
And remember how we actually fixed that? Not by telling developers to be more careful. We made the environment reproducible. Containers, log files, CI pipelines. Docker basically ended the argument.
So works on my chat is the same disease, one level up. Output that depended on one person's session history, one model version, and one lucky turn of phrase.
Ask the author to reproduce it next week. They can't. Ask a teammate to extend it. There's nothing to extend from. The knowledge is locked in a conversation that no longer exists.
The table is the part I'd screenshot. It grades 3 candidates: code, prompt, spec, against what engineering actually demands of a unit of work.
Walk the rows. Version control and diffs. Code has it. The prompt is buried in a chat. The spec is just a file in Git. Peer review. Code only at small sizes. The prompt literally never gets reviewed. The spec is 2 pages, so it actually can be.
Testability is the row that surprised me. Code has unit tests, sure, but what would it even mean to test a prompt?
Nothing. That's the point. A prompt carries no pass-fail criteria. A spec carries acceptance criteria by construction. So verification is built in.
And the deterministic meaning row is honest. Even the spec only gets a yellow warning there, with a note that ears narrows it.
Which I respect. English is never as unambiguous as code semantics. The claim isn't that a spec is perfect. It's that a constrained spec beats a vibe by a mile.
Let me push once though. Plenty of people save their prompts. Prompt libraries, prompt files in the repo. Doesn't that fix the durability row?
It fixes storage, not meaning. A saved prompt without criteria is still ambiguous. The model fills the gaps differently each run, and a new model version fills them differently again. You version control the lottery ticket, not the prize.
Version control the lottery ticket. Okay, that's going in my next code review.
Take it. The bottom callout is the keeper, though. The fix in 2005 was making the environment reproducible.
And the fix now is making the intent reproducible. For agents, the reproducible environment is a spec.
That flip is the heart of the whole paradigm, and it gets its own section.
The inversion, big one, go.
Section 2. The inversion.
You said this is the slide the whole deck hangs on. No pressure.
It really is, though. Everything before this was symptoms. Everything after is implementation detail.
The pill on the divider gives it away in 3 clauses. Spec equals source of truth. Code equals build artifact. Humans equal editors of intent.
And each clause is genuinely uncomfortable the first time you sit with it. Especially the middle one, for people who've spent 15 years treating code as the precious thing.
I have strong feelings about my beautifully handcrafted error handling. Yes.
So did assembly programmers in 1975. That's literally the analogy coming up.
Compilers as precedent. Okay, I want to see if it holds up. Analogies to compilers usually break somewhere.
This one breaks in a really instructive place, actually. The slide is honest about it. There's a caveat box waiting for you.
One framing question before we flip. Is this actually new? Or is it waterfall in a trench coat? Big spec up front, then execution.
The difference is loop length. Waterfall's spec to feedback cycle was months. Here, the agent regenerates in minutes, so the spec stays alive instead of fossilizing.
Huh, fair. A spec you can re-execute cheaply is a different species from one you hand to a contractor and wait.
Keep that one in your pocket. It disarms half the hallway objections.
A big idea and a built-in disclaimer. My favorite combination.
Then let's flip the artifact. Okay, here it is. The slide, everything else is a footnote too. Spec in, code out.
Sell me the compiler analogy then. The diagram has 2 pipelines, 1970 on top, 2025 on the bottom.
So think about what compilers did to assembly. Before them, assembly was the precious artifact. People wrote it by hand, reviewed it line by line, took pride in it. After compilers won, nobody looked at assembly anymore. The source became the thing you keep, and the binary became disposable. Regenerated whenever you like. Nobody reviews the binary. Nobody commits the binary.
Well, somebody commits the binary. We've all seen that repo.
And we judge them. Anyway, spec-driven development is the same move, one level up. Spec is the durable, versioned, reviewed artifact. Code is the build output.
And the regeneration bullet follows from that. Bug in the behavior? Fix the spec and rerun the loop instead of doing archaeology on generated code.
Right. You don't patch a binary with a hex editor. Increasingly, hand-patching agent-generated code feels just as backwards.
Okay, here's where I push. A compiler is deterministic. Same source, same flags, same binary, bit for bit. An agent is a probability distribution wearing a trench coat. Doesn't that kill the analogy?
That's exactly the caveat box. And I love that the slide owns it instead of hiding it. Same spec, two runs, two different implementations. Different file structure, different variable names, sometimes a different library choice.
So, how do you trust a compiler that never produces the same thing twice?
You stop trusting the process and start verifying the output. That's the key sentence. Verification replaces determinism as the trust mechanism, which is why the spec has to carry acceptance criteria and tests. The implementation can vary all it wants, as long as every criterion passes. Behavior is pinned, implementation is free.
Huh. So the spec plays the role of source code and conformance suite at the same time. That's actually a tighter contract than most handwritten code has.
Most handwritten code can't tell you what it's supposed to do either. We just pretend otherwise.
What does this look like in practice for you? Like, concretely, this week?
On our current project, the spec lives next to the code in the repo. When behavior is wrong, the rule is nobody hotfixes the generated module. You amend the spec, rerun the agent loop, and the verification step replays the criteria, including a small playwright suite for the user-facing flows.
Wait, you regenerate whole modules? Not just patch?
Modules, yes. Honestly, whole service regeneration is still aspirational. The pure version of this paradigm is ahead of where most teams are, ours included. But the direction of travel is unmistakable.
Okay, and the third bullet, the role change. Humans stop being typists and debuggers and become editors of intent.
Deciding what should exist, why it matters, and what counts as done. People hear that as a demotion, and I'd argue it's the opposite. That's the part of the job that always required judgment.
The typing was the easy part. The arguments about what done means were always the real work.
Now the arguments just happen in a markdown file instead of a sprint retro.
Alright, so if the spec is doing this much heavy lifting, what exactly does it buy you? Itemized.
Next slide is literally the receipt. 4-line items.
The receipt, as promised, 1 artifact, 4 jobs. Contract, regression anchor, onboarding doc, review unit.
You sound like you've already picked a favorite.
Regression anchor, easily. But contract first, in order. The spec is the agreement between human and agent. What to build, what not to touch, what done means. And the line I like. Disputes resolved by reading the spec, not by re-rolling the prompt.
Which is a real upgrade over arguing with a chatbot at 11 at night about what you obviously meant.
We've all typed, no, not like that. Enough times to fund a small data center.
Okay, defend your favorite. Why is regression anchor the big one?
Because of a thing that's genuinely new in our industry. The compiler itself now changes under you. Model versions roll over every few months. Same prompt, new model, different behavior. With a spec, after any change, your code, the agent, the model, you re-verify against the same acceptance criteria. Behavior drift becomes something you detect in CI, not something an angry customer reports.
We lived that one. A model upgrade quietly changed how an agent handled empty state rendering across a dashboard. With criteria checked in, the verification run flagged it the same afternoon. Pre-spec, we'd have found out from support tickets in week 2.
See, that story is the whole pitch. Then job 3, onboarding. New teammate reads 2 pages of spec instead of 40,000 lines of generated code.
And the slide sneaks in the better half of that point. A new agent session is also an onboarding event. The spec is how the why survives the chat that produced it, for humans and machines alike.
And 4, the review unit. Humans give real attention to 2 pages of intent instead of rubber stamping a 3,000 line diff.
That one's subtle, because review doesn't go away, it moves. You review the spec hard going in and the verification report coming out. The middle, the generated code, gets sampled rather than read line by line.
Which still makes some reviewers deeply itchy, to be fair. Letting go of line by line is a culture change, not just a process change.
True, and probably the right itch to keep for security-sensitive paths. Sample more where the blast radius is big.
Okay, the purple code box. English is the new programming language and specs are its type system. Earn it or mock it.
I came in ready to mock it and left convinced. Natural language is maximally expressive and completely unchecked. The model will accept any nonsense and produce something. A spec adds the constraints, criteria, non-goals, edge cases that catch errors before generation. Exactly the way types catch errors before runtime. It's compile time checking for intent.
And an untyped prompt fails at runtime, which in this world means in production. Fine, the code earns its box.
So the obvious next question, what does a well-typed spec actually contain?
Section 3, Anatomy time. Section 3, Anatomy of a good spec. This is where it stops being philosophy and starts being a template you can steal.
The divider lists the organs, user stories, acceptance criteria, ears, non-goals, edge cases, metrics.
Quick gut check before we go in. If you could only keep one of those 6, which one?
Honestly? Non-goals. Everyone expects me to say acceptance criteria.
Non-goals over criteria? The boring out-of-scope section?
Boring until an agent rewrites your billing module because nothing told it not to. Constraints are cheap to write and catastrophic to omit.
Okay, fair. Mine's edge cases for the record. Empty inputs and double clicks have personally cost me more weekends than any architecture decision.
Both of ours are the negative space sections, notice. The stuff you'd never think to say to a human, because humans assume.
And agents don't assume, they improvise, which is worse.
Hold that thought, it's literally on the next slide.
Sizing question while we're at the door. How long should one of these specs even be?
A couple of pages for a typical feature. Long enough to pin behavior, short enough that a reviewer actually reads every line.
So, not the 40-page requirements binders of my enterprise youth.
Those were write-only documents. These ones get executed.
6 organs, dissection time.
6 organs, and the claim is the spec limps if you skip any of them. Let's go in order. User stories first.
The example on the slide is the classic shape. As a returning user, I want passwordless login so that I don't manage credentials. We've all written 100 of these.
Sure, but there's a twist that's new in the agent era. The why clause used to be ceremony for the product manager. Now agents infer architectural decisions from it.
Infer how, concretely?
So that I don't manage credentials, nudges the agent toward magic links or passkeys instead of bolting a password reset flow onto everything. Drop the why, and you get whatever auth pattern was most common in the training data.
The why is load-bearing now. Okay, organ 2, acceptance criteria.
Testable statements of done, written in ears. They're the agent's self-check during the build and your regression anchor after it. Whole next slide is just this, so let's not spoil it.
Organ 3, your favorite, the power of no.
Non-goals. No SSO in version 1. Do not touch the billing module. It is the single cheapest sentence you will ever write, and it prevents the most expensive class of surprise.
I'll back that with a fresh wound. 2 months ago, I asked an agent to add input validation to one endpoint. It decided our error responses were inconsistent, globally, and unified them across the whole API. 41 files.
Helpful, technically an improvement. Completely unrequested.
3 downstream clients broke because they'd been passing the inconsistent errors. One sentence of non-goals would have saved a 2-day cleanup.
A spec without non-goals is an invitation to wander. Okay, organ 4, edge cases, your favorite.
The slides list is solid. Empty inputs, 10 megabyte payloads, expired tokens, the double click on submit, hostile input. And the line that should be framed. Agents handle what you name and improvise on what you don't.
And improvisation in error handling is where production incidents are born. A human developer pauses and asks what should happen here. An agent confidently picks something.
Usually a silent catch block. Confidence is not correctness.
Organ 5, success metrics. The slides example, P95 login under 400 milliseconds, auth errors under 0.1%.
I like the framing that metrics turn it works from an opinion into a measurement. It's also what makes the verification step automatable. A playwright run plus a latency check can grade those without a human in the loop.
And then the rule of thumb that ties the whole anatomy together. Precise about behavior, silent about implementation.
That one needs defending though. Why silent on implementation? Surely I sometimes care that it's Postgres and not Mongo.
Then that's a constraint. Organ 6. Stack and security constraints get their own box on the diagram. The rule is about not overspecifying. Pin what must be true, leave the how free. Because that freedom is exactly what makes regeneration possible later.
Right, if the spec dictates every class name, you've just written code in a worse language.
Beautifully put. Now, the phrasing of those acceptance criteria, that's a whole discipline. And it comes from jet engines of all places.
Years, been waiting for this one.
Okay, this is my favorite origin story in the whole deck.
Ears, the easy approach to requirements syntax, was not invented for AI at all. It came out of Rolls-Royce for writing jet engine requirements.
Wait, actual jet engines? I assumed it was some agile consultancy thing.
Actual jet engines. Alistair Maven and his team at Rolls-Royce somewhere around 2009. In aerospace, an ambiguous requirement isn't a bug ticket, it's a safety finding. So they built sentence templates that squeeze the ambiguity out of English.
And 15 odd years later, AWS dusts it off for Kiro's requirements files. Aerospace rigor recycled for coding agents.
Which makes complete sense when you think about who's reading. An agent is the most literal minded junior engineer you will ever onboard. Templates that survive safety audits are exactly what it needs.
Give me the core template then.
One shape. When trigger, the system shall response. One trigger, one response, one testable claim per sentence. The slides example. When a user submits the sign-up form, the system shall validate the email format before creating the account.
There's nothing clever in that sentence at all.
That's the point. Ambiguity has nowhere to hide. Every requirement maps one-to-one to a test case. You can almost mechanically transcribe it into a unit test or a playwright assertion.
And the code block shows 5 flavors. Walk me through them.
Ubiquitous for always true rules. The system shall encrypt stored tokens at rest. No trigger, just law. Event-driven is the when shape we just did. State-driven uses while. While the device is offline, the system shall queue writes locally. That's behavior during a condition, not at a moment.
Oh, that when versus while distinction is sneaky good. Offline first bugs are almost always someone treating a state as an event.
Exactly. Then unwanted behavior, the if-then shape. If the payment gateway times out, then the system shall retry up to 3 times and alert on final failure. That's your error handling clause. And finally, optional with where. Where two-factor is enabled, the system shall require a code at login. Feature flag behavior.
5 sentence shapes for all of software? That feels like it should be too rigid.
The honest claim is more like 5 shapes cover the vast majority of what you need to say, and the leftover few percent you write as plain prose anyway. It's a vocabulary, not a cage.
I'll admit my conversion moment. First time I made a team write criteria this way, the pushback was that it felt robotic. 3 weeks in, our agent's first pass accuracy on tasks went up so visibly that the complaints just stopped.
Robotic phrasing for the robot. Who knew?
And the smell test at the bottom deserves a shout out. Scan your criteria for the words fast, user-friendly, robust, and etc.
If a criterion contains one of those, it isn't a criterion, it's a wish. Rewrite until a machine could grade it pass or fail.
Because soon, a machine literally will be grading it. That's the verification loop we keep gesturing at.
So that's the language. Next question is, who industrialized it? The tooling section.
The part where 3 companies independently invent the same markdown files. Section 4. The industry landscape. 5 names on the divider. GitHub SpecKit, AWS Kiro, Tessel, Claude Code, Cursor.
5 logos, one idea wearing different trench coats.
That's genuinely the thesis of this section, yes.
Worth saying what kind of 5 they are though. A code host, a cloud giant, a venture-backed startup, a model lab, and an editor company.
Which matters for the convergence argument. If 5 competitors with completely different business models land on the same shape, that's signal, not marketing.
Or it's one good blog post that everyone read.
Always possible in this industry. But these shipped within months of each other, with real engineering behind each. That's a lot of conviction for a meme.
Plan for the section? Deep dive on the 2 big ones first.
SpecKit and Kiro get a slide of their own. Then everything lands in one comparison table, including Tessel, Claude Code, and Cursor rules.
Timeline check too. These all shipped or matured within about a year of each other, right?
Kiro hit preview in the summer of 2025, SpecKit landed that September, and the memory file and rules pattern spread through the same window. Very tight cluster.
So either everyone's right or everyone copied the same homework.
The table should settle which.
I do love a comparison table. Reserving my pushback for it now.
Noted and feared. The heavyweights first. The 2 heavyweights, side by side. GitHub SpecKit on the left, AWS Kiro on the right. Different packaging, same religion.
SpecKit first. The code block shows it bootstrapping with a single init command. And the line I noticed is that it's agent agnostic. Copilot, Claude Code, or Gemini CLI underneath.
That's the strategic tell, right? GitHub didn't tie it to Copilot. They're betting on the workflow, not the model.
And the workflow is a 5-step ritual of slash commands. Constitution, specify, plan, tasks, implement.
Constitution is the one people skip and shouldn't. Your non-negotiable principles. Testing standards, style, security posture. It rides along on everything after.
Then specify captures user stories and requirements. The what and the why. Plan picks the stack and architecture. The how. Tasks chops the plan into small reviewable pieces. And implement has the agent execute task by task, checking items off as it goes.
And the design insight is that every step is a checkpoint. You review a small document at each gate instead of one giant diff at the end. It's the mega diff fix institutionalized.
Devil's advocate. 5 gates is a lot of ceremony for a small feature. Does anyone actually run all 5 for a button color change?
No, and they shouldn't. In practice, teams run the full ritual for features and skip straight to implement for trivia. The ritual scales with the stakes. Same as you wouldn't write an RFC to fix a typo.
Okay, right column, Kiro. Amazon went further and built a whole IDE around the idea.
And the user experience is genuinely different. You type one feature prompt and Kiro fans it out into 3 generated files. A requirements file with user stories and acceptance criteria in EAR syntax. The actual jet engine templates from last section.
Aerospace requirement syntax shipping in a consumer IDE. Still not over it.
Then a design file. Architecture, data flow, sequence diagrams derived from those requirements. And a tasks file. The order checklist the agent works through. Requirements, design, tasks. Sound familiar?
It's the same pipeline as SpecKit with the steps renamed. Specify, plan, tasks. Requirements, design, tasks.
2 teams, no coordination, same shape. That's the convergence preview.
The steering files are the bit I haven't used. Product, tech, and structure conventions that ride along on every request.
Think of them as the standing context, the stuff you'd otherwise repeat in every prompt. What the product is, what stack you're on, how the repo is organized. Functionally, it's Kiro's answer to a Claude Code memory file.
A friend of mine trialed Kiro when it launched and said the weirdest part was psychological. Typing one sentence and getting a requirements doc back felt like cheating, until the doc caught a missing edge case she hadn't thought of.
That's the underrated feature of generated specs. They're a checklist generator for your own blind spots. You correct the draft instead of staring at a blank page.
So, two giants, one pattern. Requirements, design, tasks, gates, and three more players to place.
Table time.
The promise table. 5 tools, 4 columns. Spec artifact, workflow, best for. Top 2 rows we just did, so let me poke at the other 3.
Poke away.
Tessel. The table calls its artifact spec as the registry published unit. That phrasing is doing a lot of work. What does it actually mean?
It's the most radical bet on the board. Founded by Guy Podjarny, the Sneak founder, so this isn't his first developer tools rodeo. Tessel treats the spec itself as the published unit, like a package in a registry, with code generated and regenerated from it.
So you depend on a spec the way you depend on an NPM package, and the implementation underneath is regenerable?
That's the vision. The purest all-in version of spec as source of truth. And investors put 9 figures behind it before it fully launched, which tells you how seriously the thesis is being taken.
It also tells me venture capital exists. I'll grade it when there's a production system on it.
Fair. It's the most speculative row. Which is exactly why the next 2 rows matter. They are the boring versions people already use daily.
Claude Code. The artifact is the persistent memory file plus plan mode and custom commands.
Think of that memory file as a standing spec. Project conventions, commands, constraints that steers every session in the terminal. Plan mode adds the propose before execute gate, and custom commands let you script your own ritual.
That one I can vouch for. We added a proper memory file to our main repo, and the difference was immediate. The agent stopped reinventing our error handling conventions every single session. Small file, outsized effect.
And cursor rules round out the table. Scoped rule files that auto-attach when the agent touches matching paths. Conventions enforced inside the editor, per directory if you like.
So the spectrum runs from heavyweight ritual, SpecKit, Kiro, through standing memory, Claude Code, down to lightweight scoped rules with cursor.
And now squint at the whole table, because this is the slide's actual point. A code host, a cloud giant, a startup, a model lab, and an editor company. 5 independent teams, and every single one landed on durable markdown artifacts living in the repo that steer the agent.
They differ on ceremony. Not one of them bet on the chat log.
That's convergent evolution. When 5 different body plans all grow the same eye, the eye is probably load-bearing.
Okay, that's a good line. Practical question to close though. Someone listening has none of these. Where do they start?
Cheapest first step is a memory file or rules file in whatever tool you already use. That's an afternoon. Graduate to SpecKit or Kiro when you want the full gated pipeline. The ritual matters more than the brand.
And once the tooling is in place, the question becomes how much you actually trust it with.
Which is a ladder. Section 5.
Section 5. The autonomy ladder and then the money.
The pills on the divider give away both endings, level 0 to level 4, and determinism beats heroics.
I like that these two share a section actually. Why pair the ladder with the economics?
Because the ladder answers how far you can delegate, and the economics answers why you'd bother climbing. One without the other is either reckless or pointless.
Reckless being the team that hands an agent the whole backlog with no spec, pointless being the team that writes beautiful specs and still reviews every line by hand.
You've met both teams, I see.
I've been both teams. In the same quarter.
Then this section is your redemption arc. Quick prediction before we flip. Where do you think most teams sit on the ladder right now?
Level 2, surely. Agents doing scope tasks, humans steering every turn.
That's the slide's read too. The interesting part is what the jump to level 3 actually requires. And it's not what people assume.
My guess at the wrong assumption. People think the next rung needs a smarter model.
You're stealing the punchline.
I've been listening for 40 minutes, some of it stuck.
Then the slide will feel like vindication.
Now you have to show me.
Here's the self-assessment question that defines this whole slide. How big is the unit of work you can safely hand to a machine?
And the ladder grades the answer. A line, a snippet, a task, a feature, a milestone.
Level 0 is autocomplete. Human writes everything, the model suggests the next few tokens. The unit of delegation is a line. That's 2021 Copilot. And honestly, it's still most of the industry's daily experience.
Level 1 is chat assisted, and I feel personally described. Ask the chatbot, copy, paste, fix. Unit is a snippet.
With the bonus property that all the knowledge dies in the chat window. We spent 2 slides on that funeral.
Level 2 is where most agent users actually are today. Task agents. The agent edits multiple files, runs tests for a scoped task, but a human steers turn by turn. Unit is a task.
And it feels great at first, which is exactly why teams plateau there. You're getting real leverage, so it's not obvious anything's missing.
So, what's actually different at level 3? Because the bullet says the unit becomes a feature, but the mechanism matters.
The mechanism is verification. The human writes and reviews the spec, the agent plans and implements, and then verifies its own work against the acceptance criteria. That last clause is the rung.
Because without criteria, the agent finishing a feature unsupervised is just vibe coding with extra steps.
Exactly. The spec is what lets the loop close without you in it. The agent runs the unit test, runs the playwright suite, checks each criterion, and only surfaces when it's done or stuck.
And level 4. Agent fleets working a backlog, humans gating at spec approval and release. Is anyone really doing that, or is that the aspirational rung?
Honestly, mostly aspirational at full scale. You see real versions in narrow domains, fleets grinding through migration backlogs, dependency upgrades, test coverage debt. Whole product level 4 is still rare.
The two-gate design is the interesting part though. Spec approval going in, release approval coming out, and humans deliberately absent from the middle.
Because the middle is where human review adds the least value and costs the most time. Judgment belongs at intent and at release, not at line 47 of a generated diff.
Okay, the orange callout. The jump from level 2 to 3 is a process change, not a model change.
This is the one I want tattooed on every engineering roadmap. I've watched teams wait for the next model release to unlock autonomy. And meanwhile, a team on the identical model jumps to level 3 because they started writing specs to verify against.
Same model, different harness. Teams stuck at level 2 are missing artifacts, not intelligence.
That's the sentence. The capability has been there for a while. The process is the unlock.
So why climb at all? Level 2 feels safe and productive. What actually pays for the ceremony?
Money. Next slide is just arithmetic.
All right, the money slide. You promised arithmetic and I'm the one who always asks for numbers, so numbers.
2 costs in agent-driven development. Wildly different sizes. Cost 1 is tokens, what you pay for generation. Cost 2 is rework. Senior engineers reviewing diffs, debugging regressions, rebuilding lost context.
And the claim is they're moving in opposite directions?
Token prices have been collapsing since the day this market existed. When GPT-4 launched in 2023, you paid around $30 per million input tokens. 2 years later, models in that capability class cost a small fraction of that. The price of a given level of intelligence has been dropping something like an order of magnitude a year.
While the rework cost is priced in senior engineer salaries and customer trust, which last I checked are not dropping an order of magnitude a year.
Salaries are stubbornly non-deflationary, yes.
So walk the table with that lens. Tokens. Vibe coding looks cheap per shot, but you reroll 5 to 10 times.
Whereas spec-driven runs cost more per run. All that planning and verification, but you execute once or twice. People stare at the per-run invoice and miss the multiplier.
Review row. 3,000 line diff skimmed versus 2-page specs actually read. Rework row. And this is the bolded one. Rework is the dominant cost of vibe coding because intent was never anchored.
That row is where the real money lives. A regression that reaches production costs you an incident, a rollback, a post-mortem, and a dent in customer trust. Criteria that catch drift before merge cost you a few million tokens. It's not close.
We actually did this math at my place last quarter, roughly. Our agent token bill for a month was less than 1 day of one senior engineer's loaded cost. One avoided incident pays for the year.
That's the trade in one sentence. Spending tokens to save engineer hours is the best deal in software right now.
Last row of the table is the one I underrated on first read though. Model upgrade. It's the sleeper.
Vibe coding, a model upgrade means reprompting everything from memory. Spec driven, you rerun the same specs on the better model and pocket the improvement.
So the spec is an appreciating asset. Same document, better implementation every model generation, essentially for free.
Prompts don't transfer, vibes don't transfer. Specs compound. That's the green chip on the slide, and it might be the strongest single argument in the deck.
One honest caveat before the slogan though. Specs aren't free to write. Someone's spending real hours on requirements and criteria. Does that ever outweigh the savings?
For genuinely throwaway work, sure. Don't spec a one-off script. That's the vibe coding sweet spot we conceded earlier. The arithmetic flips the moment the code has a second user or a second month of life.
Which brings us to the slogan in the green box. Determinism beats heroics.
A mediocre but repeatable loop outperforms brilliant one-off prompting. For exactly the reason CI beat careful deploys by the one person who knew the system. We didn't make deploys heroic, we made them boring.
Boring is the highest compliment in infrastructure.
And on that romantic note, time to land the plane. Summary.
Last section, cheat sheet and takeaways.
The part of every deck where we find out if it actually compresses or if it was 20 slides of vibes about vibes.
That would be painfully ironic, given the subject.
I think it compresses though. The whole argument is really one move applied everywhere. Capture intent as a durable artifact, then verify against it.
That's a good one-liner. The cheat sheet basically runs that move across 8 dimensions. Source of truth, unit of work, review, done, regressions, knowledge, upgrades, and the human role.
Old world in one column, spec-driven world in the other?
Exactly the format. The kind of table you screenshot and send to the one teammate who still merges on vibes.
We both know that teammate. Some weeks, I am that teammate.
Then the screenshots for you. After the table, 5 takeaways and we're out.
Do we owe the listener any homework before the recap?
One small thing. Pick a feature you shipped this month and try writing its spec after the fact. Stories, criteria, non-goals.
The post hoc spec. Painful and revealing. Like reading your own code from 3 years ago.
If you can't state the acceptance criteria of something you already shipped, that's exactly the gap this paradigm fills.
Brutal but fair. Table first then. Show me the 2 worlds. 8 rows, 2 worlds. Let's trade. You take a row, I take a row.
Deal. Source of truth. Old world, the code, plus whatever lived in someone's memory. New world, the spec, with code as a build artifact.
Unit of work. An ephemeral prompt versus a version spec file in Git. We spent a whole table on why the prompt fails that audition.
Review unit. The 3,000-line mega diff you skim versus a 2-page spec you actually read.
Farewell, LGTM theater. Definition of done. Looks right in the demo versus acceptance criteria in years passing.
From an opinion to a measurement. Regression defense. Hope plus whatever tests exist versus re-verifying against the spec anchor.
Knowledge after the session. Evaporates with the chat versus persists, compounds, and onboards the next person. Honestly, the row that converted me? My retry Q archaeology evening still stings.
Model upgrade. Start over from memory versus rerun the same specs on the better model and pocket the improvement. The appreciating asset row.
And the last row, human role, typist, prompter, debugger, becomes editor of intent.
That's the career level summary of the whole shift. And it's worth sitting with for a second. It's not that engineers matter less, it's that the leverage moved from fingers to judgment.
Let me do one last stress test though, because a cheat sheet this tidy makes me suspicious. Is there any row where the old world honestly still wins?
Genuinely, yes. Speed to first prototype. For a throwaway spike, vibe coding wins that race every time. And the deck conceded it back in section 1. The table is about software that has to live.
Right. And the trap was never the spike. It was the spike quietly becoming the product.
That's the disease this whole paradigm vaccinates against.
And the toolbox call out at the bottom, one more time for the road.
Spec Kit for the agent agnostic ritual. Kiro for the ears first IDE. Tessel if you want the full spec registry bet. A persistent memory file for Claude code steering. Cursor rules for editor level conventions.
And the advice that beats all 5 logos. Pick one and start. The ritual matters more than the brand.
Look at you, quoting the slide unprompted.
Hit earned it. 5 takeaways and we're done.
5 things to carry out of here. Want to alternate one more time?
Go on, you take the odd ones.
1. The spec is the durable artifact. Code is a build output. Version it, review it, regenerate from it. Nobody reviews the binary. And the same fate is coming for generated code.
Still the strangest sentence in the deck to say out loud. And still the one I believe most by the end. 2. Prompts are not engineering units. Ephemeral, ambiguous, unversioned, untestable. Works on my chat is the new works on my machine.
And the cure rhymes with the 2005 cure. Make the intent reproducible by writing it down. 3. Write acceptance criteria in ears. When trigger, the system shall response. One trigger, one response. One testable claim per line. And always include non-goals.
Non-goals being the cheapest guardrail in the entire toolchain. One sentence, 41 unrewritten files. I did the experiment so you don't have to.
Your error response refactor is going to be the lasting legacy of this episode.
4. The jump from task agents to spec-driven loops is process, not model. You don't need a smarter model. You need an artifact the agent can verify against.
And climb deliberately. Humans at 2 gates. Spec approval going in, release coming out. 5. Determinism beats heroics. And specs compound. Tokens cheap and getting cheaper. Rework expensive and staying expensive. The spec you write today reruns on next year's model and yields a better system for free.
An asset, not an expense. That's the framing I'm stealing for my next planning meeting.
So, honest exit poll. Where did you start this episode and where did you land?
Started at, here comes another methodology with a manifesto. Landed at, the verification idea is real and the convergence across 5 vendors is hard to argue with. I still think pure level 4 is further out than the keynotes claim.
Which is a perfectly calibrated place to land. Skeptical on the timeline, sold on the direction.
And next episode actually does the thing, right? No more philosophy?
Hands-on. We write a first executable spec. Stories, ears criteria, non-goals, the lot. And run it through a full agent loop, verification included.
Bring your non-goals.
Bring 2. See you there.